Welcome back to the Painting Coach, and this week we are batch painting some Sisters of Silence in their classic scheme. Alright, let's get started. Now, the first thing I'd advise if you are batch painting is to use a spray can or an airbrush to get everything base coated. Now, unfortunately there is no Balthasar Gold spray, so I'm going to have to apply it by brush, and that's what I'm doing here. So I'm covering all the armour with Balthasar Gold. I'm going to shade the silver and the gold part with exactly the same colour, so it makes sense to do the silver next. And for that I'm using Iron Hand Steel and basing all of the silver areas. Now with these sisters, it's just the bolters. With all the gold and the silver based, I now use Nuln Oil to shade them all. Now you want to get everything covered, but you don't want it to pool in the recesses, so essentially you're just putting a light covering over everything. We'll highlight that silver next using Chrome from Vallejo Model Air, and all you're looking to do is catch those sharp edges, pulling your brush along the sides to get a nice crisp edge highlight. We'll move on to the cloaks next, and the first thing to do is to base coat all of them using Naggaroth Night. This is a really dark, rich purple that'll give you a great base to go from. To save time, we're not going to wash any of the recesses on these cloaks. We're just going to use that Naggaroth Night as the shadow. So take some Xereus Purple and use this to highlight all of those wide open areas on the cloaks, leaving the Naggaroth in those recesses. As the Naggaroth Night and Xereus Purple are quite similar, they will blend into each other quite nicely. So the last highlight is going to be with Genestealer Purple, and this will have exactly the same effect. What we're looking to do with this is paint this over all those raised folds and creases, as well as using the edge of the cloaks just to pull the brush and get a nice crisp highlight. We'll move on to some of the lighter parts next, and we're going to start with all the purity seals. So to base them all, we're going to use some Rakarth Flesh. We're also going to use this to base some of the areas that are going to be white later on, as it'll just help us use less coats of white and speed up the process. To add a bit of shade and definition, and to make these purity seals look a little bit old and worn, we're going to shade them with Seraphim Sepia. Now, similar to the Nuln Oil, we don't want this to pool anywhere, we just want it to tint the colour of the purity seals. Finally, to highlight the purity seals and give them that paper effect, we're going to take some Pallid Wych Flesh. Now we're going to pull the brush along the edge of these purity seals to give them that sharp edge, but we're also going to paint across them in horizontal lines, short and sharp, to give the effect of worn old paper. Staying on the theme of the lighter parts of the model, we're now going to base all of the white elements using Corax White. In terms of what we're looking at here, we're looking at all the gems, we're looking at any potentially white parts such as the ribbons on the leader of the squad, as well as all of those cords and ropes that we've got dangling down. Don't forget to do any filigree as well that you have on the back of the cloaks. To add some definition to these white areas, we're going to use Apothecary White contrast paint. Now it's really important that you use this very sparingly. Just use the tip of your brush because you don't want it to spill outside of the edges. So just take your time and apply it so you get a nice bit of differentiation between the Corax White and those deeper areas. Lastly, we'll highlight these areas using White Scar. Now the same rules apply. Take your time, get a good point on your brush and apply them along the edges where you can so you get a nice crisp highlight. Otherwise, just be careful that you don't make any mistakes, as you'll need to go back in and correct them if you do. These Sisters of Silence and Adeptus Custodes tend to have a heck of a lot of gems on them. So to get these done really easily, all we're going to do is just take some Talassar Blue contrast paint and paint this over the white base that we've already painted in those gem slots. Once it dries, this will give you a really nice cool gem effect. Somewhat uniquely, these Sisters of Silence all have some fur on their cloaks. Now some of them have it all the way along the length, some of them just around the shoulders. We're going to paint this in a white grey effect, so firstly take some Mechanicus Grey and use this to paint all of the fur. Once that's dry, we'll add the first highlight using Administratum Grey. Now you want to use an old brush for this, dip it in the paint, then wipe most of it off on a paper towel as though you're doing a dry brush, and then you can just gently work it over those raised parts of fur to give that nice highlight, leaving the Mechanicus in the recesses. For the final highlight of White Scar, we're going to use exactly the same technique, so dip your paint in the brush, wipe most of it off, and then use it along the raised areas of the fur. We're focusing around the neck areas, which is going to be most exposed, as well as on the back of the cloaks where we have those folds. We want to focus there because that's the area that will be highlighted and therefore lightest. We're getting towards the end of these models now and we're going fairly quickly. So firstly we're going to take some Abaddon Black and use this to base all of the boots, any exposed armour undersuit, as well as all the hair on the models. To highlight it, you take some Mechanicus Grey. For the leather parts on the boots, we just want to draw some very fine lines, so make sure you've got a good tip on your brush. And for all the hair, we're very blessed with lots of texture, so we can use the side of the brush and use that to just pick up some nice sharp highlights. So it's just the armour left, and we're going to use Runelord Brass for the first highlight. In terms of how we're going to apply this, we're going to put it pretty much over most of the armour, except we're going to leave anything in the recesses and that doesn't catch the light in that darker Balthasar Gold. So work your way around the model, take your time around areas you've already finished, and just have a look at the video if you're not sure where to place your highlights. Once you've finished with that, then take some Canoptek Alloy and use this very much as an edge highlight for the areas where you've placed that Runelord Brass. So you're looking to catch any areas using the side of your brush, and we're looking at really some of the sharpest joints here, such as the edges of armour plates as well as the fingers, etc. all around the model. Now, I know I said the armour was the last part, and I was contemplating whether I do these parts because I do have videos showing something similar, but I'll quickly show you how to do a dark and a light skin effect. So for the dark skin, base it all in Dryad Bark, and for the lighter skin, base it all in Cadian Fleshtone. When that's dry, take some Gorthor Brown for the darker skin and some Kislev Flesh for the lighter skin, and what we're looking to do is highlight the brows, the nose area, as well as all of the forehead. Now, we don't have to worry about wrinkles, we just want to paint it all nice and smooth. Lastly, we'll take some washes and we're going to take Agrax Earthshade on the darker flesh and wash this all over. Then for the lighter flesh, take some Reikland Fleshshade and wash this into the eyes as well as around any borders you've got, such as around the mask, the ears and the headrests. And there we have it, 5 Sisters of Silence batch painted, ready to hit the tabletop and take on the enemies of the Imperium. I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, leave a like, leave a comment, check out my Patreon and my other content, and I'll see you next time.